Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Crush Anxiety-Induced Procrastination. It's day one and fantastic to be here sharing this incredible life-changing experience. First of all, kudos to you if you're here. That probably means that you're facing anxiety of some kind and that the impact that it has on your life is pretty big. So it's a huge accomplishment. So that is a win right off the bat just to show up. So I see a couple of people say hello. It's always great to get a chance to check out who else is participating and enjoying. Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, Jim. I see you guys. Jensen, Ted, a couple of other folks. So welcome, welcome. Over the next 5 days, I'm going to be giving you the keys to break the anxiety procrastination cycle, which is exactly what we're going to be covering today. The things that I'll be talking about this week are not your typical anxiety breathing techniques or visualization techniques or even cognitive behavioral techniques. I'm all about getting to the core of the issue and not just managing anxiety symptoms. So let's kick this off. First of all, let me know if you can hear me and see me. Hopefully all of the audiovisual stuff is working like it should. And say hello in the comments. Let everybody know where you're from, where you're watching this. If you are watching it live, use the hashtag live to let me know. Or if you are watching this later on replay, you can use the hashtag replay. It's just great for me to know who's getting value from this week, but also what I've seen in past trainings is that there is absolutely a community that starts to form when different people start to share, comment, and engage because it lets each of us know that we're not alone. And so drop a quick comment, say hello, and let us know that you're here. I see Jensen here. I see Raquel coming on. Hi, Kathy. All right, fantastic. Well, wonderful, and it's great to have you all here. So a couple of housekeeping items. You'll hear me say this over and over again this week. You are not alone. So 25 to 30% of the US population alone is diagnosed with some kind of anxiety disorder, and this is since the pandemic. And these are just people with official diagnoses and does not include people who are struggling with anxiety but haven't yet gone to see the doctor, which means that you are on a healing journey with a lot of other people. So we're absolutely in this together. Don't judge yourself for having anxiety. This is a very common thing, and we need all the support and help that we can get. So a couple of things that I want to cover before we dive in. If you haven't already, watch the orientation video as soon as you can. It will really give you the most comprehensive rundown on how to get the most out of your experience this week. So first of all, it covers the really great prizes that are available for you to win this week. And these are the biggest prizes that I've ever given away in one of these trainings. So a month of free group coaching, all of the digital courses that have been created for theanxiouspersonality.com, and a free 50-page custom anxiety assessment. So there is lots of great value there. So if you're interested, watch the orientation, figure out how you can win those prizes. It will also give you a sneak peek into what we're going to cover to help you break free from both anxiety and procrastination. So that's the main topic for today. So I encourage you not to skip over the orientation, watch the video, get prepped for a really powerful and transformative week ahead. Throughout the training, please reach out to me if you have questions. I've set aside the entire week to be able to support you. So use the hashtag questions in any of the comments, in any of the trainings. That'll help me keep track of them so I can make sure that I get back to you. On Saturday, I'll be hosting a live Q&A and answering all the questions that I get during the week. So there's no cost for the support this week. It's just a great opportunity to ask questions, for me to understand where you're at, and for me to also provide some customized steps that you can take to help break free from anxiety. Okay, so a couple of things that I want to do first. I'm going to start by saying that you will get results in these 5 days. There's a couple of things that are required for you to do that, that I highly recommend. The first one is to carve out time and space to watch the training and to actually slow down and reflect on the material. Number two is that I'm going to encourage you to open to a different perspective because what I'm sharing with you this week is likely going to be new for some of you. And that should be a good sign because you're here, because likely what you've been doing, how you've been thinking about anxiety, how you've been approaching procrastination, these things aren't really getting the job done or doing the trick. So just notice if there's a tendency or a part of you to try to cling on to your status quo. And that's completely fine. That's normal. We don't need to reject that, but it's a good to notice so that you can make room for some new thinking. Number three is the importance of doing the exercises. So I provide these exercises on a daily basis because listening to a talk or a lecture, it's not really going to do as much for you as getting into the material, working with it, digesting it, and integrating it. But also because we are specifically honing in on procrastination, what better way to work this edge than to have a little to-do list for this week? So if that's already triggering for some of you right now, that is totally fine. Don't worry about whether or not you're going to be able to do it. It's exactly where you're supposed to be, and it's exactly what we're addressing starting right now. Okay, so give me a thumbs up if you are on track, if you're able to hear, no issues from an audio visual standpoint, and let me know if you're ready. So we're gonna go ahead and dive in, I'm assuming. Let me just refresh my phone here and make sure that we're all good. Okay, fantastic. Looks like we're good. Okay, so we're going to first dive into what the anxiety procrastination cycle actually is and how it works. So, oops, sorry for, okay, here we go. All right, so anyone with anxiety likely has some of this dynamic going on, but we aren't aware of it all the time. So this cycle starts with a trigger, which is usually about something that you have to do. And maybe it's a big presentation or even a little presentation, an important report or even a not so important report, or just a task that's been weighing on your mind. And the moment that you think about it, maybe your chest tightens, the thoughts start racing, the idea of doing it starts to feel overwhelming. And so what is the reaction? Is that we procrastinate, right? We push the project aside, you distract yourself with something easier, or maybe you'll tell yourself that I'll get to it later. And in that moment, it might feel like a relief, right? So that's the reward side of things, is that you've avoided the stress, the pressure, and the anxiety that comes with the project. And the catch is that that relief obviously is only temporary. The project is still there, it's still waiting for you. And now probably you're running out of time, right? And so the anxiety then comes back, often even stronger, because now there's this added pressure of a looming deadline. And you might then have more criticism, self-criticism involved, which we're going to talk about in depth tomorrow. And that makes you want to avoid the feeling even more, right? So this cycle of anxiety, procrastination, temporary relief, it traps you into a loop and makes whatever is on your to-do list, whatever task that is pending, makes it feel more daunting. So just let me know if this is familiar to you. Drop a comment, one, just so that people can see that they're not alone. It's a really common dynamic. There is absolutely no judgment about doing any of that. It is what it is, and we just want to start getting aware and conscious of it. So let me know in the comments. I'm just going to refresh my phone, see if anybody is talking about this at all. And I'll just give it a second here. Yes, okay. Thumbs up. Yep. Jim says it's common for me. I hate this cycle. Yeah, totally. Give everybody a couple of minutes to respond here. While we're waiting for the comments to come in, just take a moment and really see the impact that this anxiety procrastination cycle has on your life. And feel free to share this in the comments too. Where are you at with this in your life? How is it impacting your work, your mental health, your relationships? And again, there's no judgment here. These are very common things that we all go through, right? So So we want to just be honest about it and also accepting of it. Okay, yeah, Jeffrey says absolutely. Jim says this is common for me. I hate this cycle. Okay, I see a couple of other people jumping on as well. Okay, great. Yeah, so this is something that we can all more or less relate to. So hopefully you've gotten just a little bit more clarity about this cycle. This is where we're starting. We want to see how it impacts your life. And I'm guessing that you're here watching this because you want to make a change. So you might not know how, you might feel some fear of trying to change, all that's fine. But for now, let's just connect with whatever part of you made you sign up for this training and get you to this place where you're watching this video either live or in replay. And from this place, I invite you to say this out loud and type it in the chat. I am ready for change. I am ready for change. And I know this can sound really cliche or like some kind of Tony Robbins seminar, but it's actually really important that we vocalize this and put it out there. It makes it come into a specific sort of time and space and makes it more real for us. So let's see who is ready for change. I love to hear this from you in the comments. Say it out loud, drop it in the comments, and let's see who here is actually um, ready to actually take some action about this, understand yourself better, and we can go from there. Yes, Annie, great. I am ready for change. Yeah, Jeffrey and Jim talked about giving speeches on Sunday to church. Same for me, performing at a new church. Yeah, and actually work with a lot of performers, and we'll talk about this this week also. Yep, Jim says ready for change. Kathy, great. Kathy's ready for change. All right, fantastic. So thanks for the energy. And this is what we're going to talk about this week is actually bringing more energy to this dynamic. One, to understand it, but also two, to start to dismantle and disrupt the anxiety procrastination pattern. Okay, so let's keep on going here. I'm just going to take a few minutes to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me yet. I'm Timothy. I'll be your support here for the next 5 days. I'm an anxiety coach and obviously the admin for the Anxious Personalities support group. This is me and my family. I've been married to my lovely wife, Jayo, going on 11 years this December. These are our two kids, Ayla and Elias. We live in Carmel Valley, California, which I consider to be one of the most beautiful places in the world. So this is actually a picture of my backyard, and obviously I'm very, very grateful for everything that I have. And for the most part, feel very full, whole, connected, content, able to do work in an anxiety-free way, able to live my life in a almost like a pretty confident, capable, able to meet my life in a full engaged sort of way. But I want you to know that it really, really wasn't always like that. So there were always times where I felt constantly afraid to fail, always feeling some kind of guilt, shame, or self-doubt. I often thought of myself as lazy, incompetent, and unworthy. And just from a physical perspective, always in a kind of constant fatigue from feeling drained, always because I was always anxious. There's so much energy getting into my life because I was worried about so many things. And as many of you know, anxiety is a really physical experience. So all of that was going on with me, but most people thought I was pretty successful, actually. I had a very lucrative career. I worked in marketing for 15 years. I had a lot of friends. I was exercising. So generally, people looked at me and would sometimes look up to me and even admire me. And I'm sharing that because a lot of people with high functioning anxiety, a lot of high achievers, this anxiety goes underneath the surface. And one of the benefits of doing a training like this and being part of a group like this is that you come to know that anxiety is very, very commonplace and it's very manageable. Okay, so people don't necessarily see us as anxious, especially if you are able to function and function really well in your life. But actually, that made the anxiety even worse for me, and we'll talk about why that is later this week. But what that did do is start my journey understanding how anxiety works and why I was anxious and what approaches helped and really didn't help. And I've tried a lot of stuff over the last 15 to 20 years: meditation, mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, hypnosis, psychedelics, law of attraction, law of vibration. I'm an ordained non-denominational priest, so lots of spiritual approaches, law of prayer, visualization, mindset shifts, really the gamut of how to approach anxiety. And ultimately, I was trying to get rid of it, trying to understand it, trying to heal it for myself. So I would be really curious to see what you have tried here. If it's not on this list, drop it in the comments. But what have you tried? What's helped for you? What really hasn't helped? In my experience, each of these things helped a little bit. They sort of moved the needle a bit, and sometimes in a different way, but none of them really worked for me permanently. They never ever fully solved the issue of anxiety. So would love to hear what people have tried. What do you find helpful? What do you really not find helpful is even also something good to look at. So I'm just going to check the comments here. Okay, fantastic. All right. So a couple of other things then. What I stumbled across was a couple of perspectives that completely changed my understanding of anxiety. And what I realized was that there was actually a way to understand the components of anxiety itself. So before, anxiety felt like one big mess. It wasn't something that I could easily pin down. It seemingly just came out of nowhere. And anyone that I worked with would never really be able to say, hey, this is what's causing it, and this is what you need to do about it. So I began to explore and slowly understand the actual mechanism that triggered anxiety. And that suddenly made healing anxiety much more doable. And today I'm going to share that with you. It's one of the biggest insights that I've had about anxiety and how to heal it. And I almost feel like there should be a drum roll here or something, because even though it can seem very simple, I know that it has the capacity and the potential to change your life. So hopefully you are ready for this. And it's quite easy. It's called the anxiety ratio. This is the first massive insight that I had, and is that anxiety can be explained in terms of a simple ratio. So feel free to write this down so that you remember it. Um, the ratio is that anxiety equals perceived threat divided by the capacity to cope with that threat. So the top portion of the ratio is the degree of your perceived threat, or your estimation of that perceived threat. And obviously the key word here is perceived. For example, driving to the store can be a huge perceived threat for someone, or even leaving the house can be a huge perceived threat for someone. Performing in front of a group can be a huge perceived threat for someone, right? The bottom of the ratio is your perceived capacity to cope with that threat, or more accurately, how much you believe that you can deal with that threat if it happens. Okay, so anxiety equals perceived threat over perceived capacity to cope with that threat. And what happens is that when this ratio is greater than one, in other words, when this perceived threat is greater than your capacity to cope with that perceived threat, anxiety is going to get triggered. So in the case of anxiety-induced procrastination, the perceived threat is usually some kind of task or project that we need to do, the phone call that we need to make, the email we're going to write. So if somewhere in your psyche, and this is usually unconscious, you feel like there's some danger associated with that task, and we're going to dive into what some of those dangers lurking underneath the surface are. That's going to be in some of the sessions later this week. So maybe you're going to feel like you're going to get some negative feedback. Maybe you feel like you'll upset someone, or you might fail in some way, or you might humiliate yourself. These are all perceived threats that we can all relate to, right? So give me a thumbs up, heart, whatever. Like, I'm sure that most of us can relate to some of this. It happens all the time. So that perceived threat ends up being much greater than your capacity to cope with that threat. And we're going to talk in depth about this later this week, about why we actually don't think we have the capacity to cope with certain interactions, projects, tasks, whatever it is that's needed in our lives. Okay. But for today, it's enough to know that when you feel like you can't cope with the perceived threat, you will generally try to avoid. Okay, so you avoid the task, avoid the project, avoid the call, you put it off, distract yourself, start watching binge watching Netflix, getting on your phone. And again, there's no judgment here. There's no need for us to criticize this. So put any judgment about this pattern aside. All we're doing is becoming aware of how this works in us. And we've already seen that avoidance, even though it provides a temporary kind of relief, it doesn't really work in the long run. So we can just call avoidance a kind of strategy that we use to try to cope with anxiety getting triggered. So that anxiety ratio is greater than one, anxiety gets triggered, and then some part of you starts to freak out and wants to get away from it, which is totally understandable, right? So again, how many of you can um, relate to this and would love to know how this is hitting you as we keep moving forward here? So obviously there's lots of different ways to cope with that anxiety, right? A lot of you already know these and have tried them. And to a certain extent, they help manage the symptoms of anxiety. And this is, again, one of those really big life-changing insights that I want to share with you this week, is that none of these techniques or approaches or solutions will really work as effectively if you're relating to anxiety in a particular way. So in order to make progress with anxiety, you need to make this one shift. And if you take anything away from this week's training, I want it to be this shift, is that you need to start accepting anxiety instead of trying to get rid of it. And none of these solutions will work if you're trying to get rid of anxiety. And I'm going to show you why in a minute, but this is a huge mistake that I see so many people making with their anxiety. They try to push it away and they try to eliminate it. So why is this? Because when you do that, it's because you are viewing anxiety itself as a threat. Again, no judgment. It's totally understandable. But whenever you start feeling that tightness in your chest, or the constriction in your belly, or the sweaty palms, some part of you really gets scared about it, right? It starts to view it as like, uh-oh, what am I going to do? This thing is coming. I don't know where it's coming from. It feels very scary. So let me know in the comments if this is you. Do you view anxiety as a threat? Do you try to get rid of it? Do you try to push it away? Do you try to reject it? And again, no judgment about this. Nobody likes feeling anxious. Nobody likes the physical experience of anxiety. So it's really easy to want to get away from it and view it as something unpleasant. Or if you've had panic attacks, definitely we start to view anxiety as a threat there. Okay? So I'm just going to take a pause for now, take a moment to breathe and just check in with yourself, and as honest as you can, as honestly as you can, just assess what is your relationship with anxiety, and just see how much rejection is there, how much wanting to push it away is actually there, how much, wanting to get rid of it is there for you. So take a moment to do that while I check the comments in the group. Yeah, thanks, Jim, Jeffrey, seeing your comments here, seeing a lot of people ready for change. Okay, I see Annie there. Hi, Becky, I see you there. Jensen, Ted. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, totally. All right, so let's talk about why this happens, that when you experience anxiety as a threat, you might feel that tension in the body, the sweaty palms, the nervousness, and immediately what happens? If this is the case for you, generally you might start to view these anxious feelings as a big threat. We think, oh God, there's anxiety again. It's going to keep me from giving this presentation, from getting my job done, taking care of the kids, whatever it is. The perceived threat goes way up when you experience the physical symptoms of anxiety itself. And the funny thing that happens with anxiety is that when you view anxiety as a threat, it also tends to crush your belief that you'll be able to cope with the anxiety itself. So you believe that you can't function with that anxiety, you're not able to deal with it because anxiety itself, if you tune into the physical experience of it, it actually does limit to a certain extent what's capable. You know, what is your actual capacity and ability to cope with what's going on? So then it kind of reinforces this deep belief that we don't have the capacity or don't have what it takes to deal with anxiety itself. So when you see how we position ourselves against anxiety in this way, when we perceive anxiety to be a threat, this formula goes way out of whack. Okay. When we say, I can't deal with anxiety itself, this ratio goes way up, right? Perceived threat goes way up, and then perceived capacity to cope with that threat goes way down. And then it starts to go into this huge loop where there's more anxiety, and so there's more perceived threat, and then there's further reduction in our capacity to cope with that threat, which is how panic starts. And a lot of times when you look at the methods for dealing with panic attacks, it's always just breathe and accept. Because if you don't accept it, if you continue to be scared of it and you want to push it away, it will continue to amp this anxiety ratio up, up, up. Okay. So let me know if that makes sense. If you can relate to this, hopefully, again, this is one of the biggest shifts that I experienced when I started to look at anxiety through this lens. So, what do we want to do about this? What is the antidote? And you will hear me say this over and over again. I say this to my clients over and over again because we need to hear it over and over again. It is to start to accept the anxiety, to be with it, and to even embrace it. Now, what does that actually look like? Being with anxiety means being with the physical sensations of anxiety itself and giving them space instead of pushing them away. So something a lot of my clients find helpful is to think of anxiety like a little child. And the little child has all of these feelings. It's scared, it doesn't feel capable, it feels overwhelmed. So what would you do if your child or a child came to you like that? Crying, scared, trembling, anxious? Would you reject it and tell it to go away, right? Would you try to apply all of these techniques or, give him or her medication and get the child just to stop? It's crying, it's whining, it's fear. No, we would generally be there and try to support the child the best we can. You don't take the attitude of, okay, I'm going to listen to you for 5 minutes so that you can stop crying and stop feeling scared, and then we're going to go and get on with our lives, right? Or you might listen for 5 minutes and then after that you say, okay, that's enough, all done, right? No, we have to stay with that child and support and hold those feelings. So that's what we want to do with anxiety. That's what I mean by accepting it, being with it, and embracing it. And if you're able to do that, it will change your entire relationship with anxiety. What happens when we do this? We start to shift this relationship. And the more that you do this, the more that you'll start to recognize that anxiety is actually not a threat anymore. And this is not something that you have to force. I'm not telling you to trick your mind into thinking that anxiety somehow isn't a threat. No, you will actually know anxiety isn't a threat, not just in your mind, but in your body and in your emotional state, because you'll start to see through the process of healing that we're going to talk about this week, that it's just signaling something in you wants your attention. And then as we listen to that, as we start to shift our relationship with anxiety itself, what happens to the bottom part of this ratio? When we accept anxiety, it suddenly starts to become more manageable and not as overwhelming. You start to feel like you're actually bigger than the anxiety itself instead of the other way around. So instead of the anxiety ratio getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you start to reverse that cycle, and this ratio starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And as we kind of manipulate or impact both sides of these ratios, you can see the immediate effect of anxiety in your life. So let me know how this is landing for you. Let me know in the comments. Let's just take a moment here. I invite you to take a breath, share how this is impacting you. Let me know if this makes sense, if there's anything that I can clarify. If you have questions, use the hashtag questions. Would love to hear from you, whether or not you're on live or replay. All right, so let me take a minute here. Yeah, I see Ruth Anna here. I face anxiety, but I don't think of it as a threat as much as a sense of foreboding. Yes. Yes. So anxiety is always there. Yeah. So tending to dissociate from the environment, even to a certain extent at work. Yeah, Ruth Anna, that's very common. We're going to talk about that later this week, but thanks for sharing. Yeah. I treat anxiety like it's there. Yes, Rithana, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's there and accept it as a visit, and go about all my tasks that I have to do while acknowledging my anxiety as a visitor that comes over for a cup of coffee, and anxiety eventually leaves once I accept it as a guest and I learn to live with it. Yes, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's a really, really good orientation, Ruth Anna. We're going to talk about a couple of things that we can do to sort of further that so that it's a positive guest and not a guest that's messing with your house or keeping you from doing things, making you feel even more scared and so forth. Okay, so thank you for the share there. That's fantastic. Okay, so that is all we're going to talk about today. And again, a couple of recaps here that we talked about the anxiety procrastination cycle and how anxiety gets triggered, how we then react and either avoid or procrastinate. And one thing that we will continue to hammer home is that there is a very legitimate reason why we procrastinate. Okay, why we avoid these feelings. And you can see in the anxiety procrastination cycle, there is a reward for procrastinating. We don't have to feel the anxiety. We don't have to feel the discomfort. We don't have to uh, deal with the kind of discomfort that we often feel in ourselves when anxiety is triggered. Okay. Hopefully you found the anxiety ratio as helpful as I did. So again, look at any situation where you start to get anxious, when anxiety shows up. In Ruthana's case, what you're talking about, when it shows up as a guest in your house, let's look at why it's showing up and just see, if you look at it from this lens, can you apply the ratio and see where you feel the perceived threat and where you feel the incapacity or the reduced capacity to deal with that threat. Okay. And then what I would love for you to try is just see what it's like to shift from avoiding anxiety or rejecting it, trying to get rid of it, to actually accepting and embracing anxiety. Even if it's as simple as letting yourself feel the physical discomfort of anxiety, the tension, the stress, actually just being with the nervous system in an anxious state. And that in itself will get you on the path to increasing your capacity to actually manage and deal with anxiety when it comes. Okay, so that's it for today's training. If you have questions, feel free to use the hashtag questions. You can reach out to me directly and message me through Messenger. I'll make sure to add anything on during Saturday's live Q&A. If you want, also, I'm available this week to jump on a call if you want to talk specifics about what you're going through, what you're struggling with, and I can give you some additional pointers there. So again, all of that is free for this week. Just want to be here to support each and every one of you. So at any rate, it'd be great to connect with you, see where you're at, see how I can help, and also that we're here to support each other. So feel free to reach out to each other, to add comments, support each other, share where you're at, what you're working with, and how this material is impacting you and hopefully benefiting. Okay, so before we close, here's a quick reminder about today's homework so that you can start to earn points toward the prizes at the end of the week. So what you can do is navigate to the homework guide section, which is guide 2, if I'm not mistaken. And in that guide, there is a post for day 1's homework. And in the comments, you'll name the specific time and place that you're carving out for self-reflection this week and just type that in as a comment. So an example might be before work at 8:30 a.m. on my deck. Okay, so easy and simple to remember. And we're doing this because I want you to experience real and lasting change. And again, that doesn't happen just by listening to a talk. So we really need to make it a reality by bringing it into a specific time and place. So a really quick tip about this, don't choose your desk where you work or your bed. There's just simply too many associations and barriers there to deal with. So try to choose something that's just for reflection, journaling, meditation, prayer, listening to music, whatever is going to help you uh, sort of sink into a kind of relaxed state. And if you do that, every day this week at the same time, in the same place, you are signaling to your mind and body and giving it a really good foundation for transformation. Because ultimately, what we're talking about here is increasing our capacity, increasing our awareness and our consciousness of how anxiety works, and then how we can break this procrastination cycle. And we do that by becoming aware of the patterns. Okay, the bonus task for today is to invite a friend to this training. So it's not too late for them to participate. Again, we are not alone in this. I find it really, really helpful to have other people doing this work together. So get some invites out if you feel like there are people in your life that might benefit from this, and also get a little closer to earning a prize at the end of the week. Okay, so I hope I'll see you for tomorrow as well. That's day 2, how to banish self-criticism. Have a great rest of the afternoon or evening, wherever and whenever you are watching this from. Okay, so take care, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of the day. All right, bye.